All right, we are going to show you how to put together probably the coolest mini badge at SaintCon 2022. This is the Darth Vader mini badge. It's one of the ones that I've created, but it's not for general consumption by the attendees. This is actually used by me to hand out to folks that have made some significant contributions to the conference, and it's kind of my individual thank you gift for them. And so that's how we're treating this. But if you're one of those lucky people to get one of these, this instruction video is how to put it together without breaking it or causing problems, and making it easy as possible for you. So let's get right to it. I'm gonna bring this down. We'll get this camera close, and let's look what's inside the bag here. Inside the bag, you should have several components. And Vader, it's kind of hard to get out of the bag sometimes, but here we go. So inside this bag, you should have the Darth Vader PCB. You should have 4 of these 2-position pin hitters. And then you should have a green resistor, a green LED. Oops, it kind of bounces all over the place. So green resistor, green LED, 2 red resistors, and 2 red LEDs. So that's where these are here. And then there's gonna be this resistor that's marked blue. So the blue resistor is for the LED filament, and so we'll put that on when we do that later, so that can go up there and sit by him. And then the red LEDs and the green LED actually fit on this front face of the Darth Vader, and so I'm going to show you where. It's not marked, and so you got to kind of pay some close attention to where I'm going to show you here. So on his front faceplate, there is a small pad for an LED right here. And so it actually goes top to bottom, that's the orientation, and this one right next to it also goes top to bottom. The one on the right is intended to be the green LED. The one on the left will be a red LED. And then down here, there's going to be a red LED on these 2 pads right here, okay? The other pads, so this one that's going to be horizontal, this one that's horizontal, and this one that's vertical are the resistors for the individual LEDs. And so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to add a little dab of solder to one side of each of the LED positions to make it easier to put those LEDs on here in just a minute. So I'm going to get a hot iron, clean tip, and I'm just going to heat up this topmost pad and put just a tiny dab of solder on it. The next top pad, tiny dab of solder. And then this next top pad right here is a tiny dab of solder. And so those right there will be for setting those LEDs. If you want to see that just a little bit, I put it on the 2 top pieces. So this pad, and this one, all 3 for the LED positions. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put the red LEDs on first. And so I'm going to grab the red LEDs and pull them out of this little case. You can do that by being a little put a little finesse into the LED case. You got to be careful not to make these snap and bounce all over the place. And so it's a little bit of a process, but you can get those out. Now, as you can see, these LEDs are super, super tiny. But on the back of them shows the orientation that we need to know about, okay? Let's see if this will focus in with the light. It's kind of hard, I hope the 4K thing works. This right here is the orientation. You'll see the little nub on the bottom end toward the bottom of the tweezers. That signifies the negative side of that LED. And the negative sides for these LEDs on this entire badge point down toward his feet. Okay, and so that's also a negative side. And so those 2 are oriented correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this to the side to make this a little bit easier to handle. And I'm going to take one of these LEDs and I'm going to turn it over to where the negative side is pointing toward his feet. That's where the little nub goes. And I'm going to grab my soldering iron, and I'm going to grab and just ever so gently grab that LED, and I'm going to heat up that solder that I put up there on that pad and just move that LED right into it. And so that's one of the red ones. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to just rest my tweezers on top and heat that pad up for a third time. And you'll actually feel that LED sink even further down. It's kind of a soldering technique that will work really well. And so you'll notice that I put this first red LED on the left-hand side of his chest. This other LED, again with the nub pointing down, which means it's kind of backwards, so I'm going to twist it around. LED pointing to his feet is going to come down here on this little pad. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get right in here, grab it nice and gently, and I'm going to heat up this solder right here at the edge and just slide the LED into it. And then I'm going to rest my LED or my tweezers on top of the LED, and I'm just going to heat it up until it sinks down flush. And then once I'm done with that, I can take this little bit of solder and I can just put it right at the bottom end of that LED and just touch it with the soldering iron, and that should be all that's necessary to connect that LED. And I'm going to do the same thing up here with this LED. And so now both of those, if we take a look in the camera, both of those LEDs are connected in those positions. Okay, again, these are the two red LEDs, and that's where they go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same exact thing with the green LED, and it's just going to set to the side at the top on his chest. So it's a little bit of a pain. I'm doing this off camera a little bit, but grabbing the green LED, popping it out. These are super small LEDs to be able to fit on his chest. On here, if you look really closely, you can see that nub pointing this way. And so that's the negative side, meaning that that has to be turned around and pointed toward his feet. And I'm going to set it just right here on the PCB so I can get a good hold of it. Get right up here close, and I'm going to grab it. And I'm going to heat up this solder pad right here and just slide that LED into it. Put my tweezers on top and just gently resting it and heating that solder one last time. It kind of lets it sit right down flush with the board. I'm going to get my solder now. And this fine solder makes this a whole lot easier to work with. And I'm just going to touch that. And on this other side, just because I think I didn't have quite enough solder, I'm going to add just a dab right there. And so now, just like that, the green LED is on there next to the red LED. It's not perfect. I'm not the best solderer in the world, but I can get the job done. So next we're going to put on the resistors for this. And so I'm just going to heat up one side of this pad here, one side of this pad here, and I'll do the top one over here for good measure. And that's where the three LEDs the three LED resistors are going to go. And so I'm going to open up this tab with the two red resistors in it. You can kind of just stick the tweezers in there. Just be careful not to push through and poke yourself. But these are two 68 ohm resistors. I'm going to set them right here. And they go, I just kind of set them on the board and get them all ready. And for this one, I'm going to turn him this way because it's easier to do this when you're right-handed. I'm going to take this little guy. Actually, yeah. And then I'm going to set him right. Actually, you know what? I better remind myself real quick which ones go where. So on the back, the LED comes out and goes over to there. Okay, so I'm just following the traces to make sure that I remember where these things go and which resistor sinks which thing. Okay, so the red resistor is the one at the top, like I thought. So 68 ohm resistor, one of them goes right here at the top. And I'm just heating up that solder pool and letting that sink down and be flush. I'm gonna grab the other red resistor, and it goes down here on his belt on this one that's vertical for this LED. And so I'm just gonna, again, heat up this little solder thing and slide the resistor in, rest my tweezers gently on top, and heat it up one last time. Sinks right down. And then we'll take both of these resistors and complete the other side with just a tiny dab of solder there and a tiny dab of solder there, and that's all that's needed for that. Next, we're going to get the green resistor. Slightly different value. If you do mess this up and they get in the wrong position, it's not going to hurt much. It's just the LEDs won't be the right brightness all the way across the board. So 56 ohm resistor comes in right here, and I'm just going to do the same thing I've done up to this point. Grab the thing, heat up this, drop that in there, rest my tweezers on it, make sure it's flush against the board. I'm going to grab the solder over here, and I'm just going to connect the other side. And we have all of the hardest LEDs and components on the front on the board without any problems, or few problems, right? Okay, the next thing we need to do is connect the LED filament to the board. The LED filament's inside this container. It's there to keep it from being bent because they are super fragile unless they're reinforced with something. So you just kind of carefully open that up. Inside is going to be the LED filament. We'll pop it out and you can kind of see what that looks like. A couple of things for you to recognize and notice about this. On one end, there's going to be a lead that has a little hole in it right next to the edge, and the other side will not have a hole in it. And so to make this really easy, the side with the hole goes to the very top of the PCB board. So it's the top of the lightsaber. In order to put that in there, what you're going to want to do is turn this sideways and very carefully, in only one movement, bend that down so it's at about a 90-degree angle, okay? And it's super fragile because that hole will actually break if you bend that back and forth even more than once or so. And then at the bottom end, you're going to do the same thing, holding the filament so you don't twist it or put pressure on it at all. And then you're just going to bend this same one down at that same 90-degree angle. And then once you've done that, you can safely grab the PCB and just stick the top piece in that top hole. And the bottom one will fit right there in the bottom hole. Oops, kind of popped out. You got to be careful, again, not to break the filament. And then you're just going to gently turn it over and set it on the ground right here so that the PCB's weight is holding it on the board. And then literally we're just going to add a little dab of solder to lock it in on the bottom. Make sure it's pushed down and flush. Add a little blob on the top. And then this filament is actually installed and looking great. And so the important thing is to have it as flush to the board as possible so that it's got some structure, so that you don't crack it or break it. And then at this point, that LED filament is in there, but we need one last resistor, which is the blue one right here, in order to turn down the brightness of that lightsaber, because without a resistor of a significant value, that thing is as bright as the sun. So I'm going to take this resistor goes right here. It's a big one, it's easy to install. So I'm going to grab my tweezers. See if I can do this with my left hand. And we're going to take this and I'm just going to heat that up and push that resistor into it. Again, rest my tweezers on top, heat it up one more time to make sure it's flush with the board. And then I'm going to get this little piece of solder here and finish this up by connecting it to the bottom end of that. And then that resistor will tone down that LED filament just enough to make it not just overwhelm you. Okay, last thing we've got to do is put the pin headers together. The easiest way to do this is to just find one of these boards that you built or you have on your badge or whatever that has one of these open positions, and stick the two position headers in the corners. And then once you do that, these will kind of line right up with where they need to be. Let me get a slightly bigger piece of solder to make this process just a little easier. So I'm going to get this piece. I'm going to grab my iron, and I'm just going to rest my finger on the board to keep it flush. And I'm just going to add just a tiny bit of solder at the first foot, second position. And then once those are set and cooled, the rest of them should just go pretty simple and easy. And then with that, this mini badge is complete. And I don't have a really good, let me see if I can get him to fire up for you. He uses the clock on the mini badge, and I don't have a clock on this board, but I can most certainly shunt some power in here and we can light up his lightsaber. Let's just put some power right there and some power right here. Oh, maybe I pulled him off the 3-volt lead. So it's not gonna work here, but I promise you it'll work when you stick it on your badge. This is the Darth Vader Minibadge. I hope you enjoy it, and thanks for contributing to SaintCon.